Greetings once again, and welcome to another episode of Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal. We're starting off with some Stadium 2 footage because I have some housekeeping, quote-unquote, to take care of. See, I decided to go ahead and finally use the Sunstones to get the two Sunstone evolutions that are in this game, and for one of those I had to raise a Gloom off camera because they decided to give a Sunstone evolution to Gloom. Just so we're clear, I'm not showing myself capturing and raising any Pokemon that originated in Gen 1 because if you wanted to see that, you would go to the Gen 1 playthrough, but I will show myself getting the new evolutions, so here they are. I gotta say though, I wish Johto didn't hate grass types as much as it seems to because I really want to use Sunflora in a playthrough sometime. Sunflora just looks like a fabulous Pokemon to actually use. Starts with some really great moves, and evolving it early with a Sunstone doesn't really hurt it too much, unlike Bellossom, which is the Sunstone evolution for Gloom. I really don't know why they decided to give Gloom another form, because Bellossom really isn't that much different from Vileplume, aside from the fact that it lacks the poison type and therefore lacks most poison moves that Vileplume had. But whatever, I don't make these decisions. In addition to Sunstone evolutions, we also have Silver getting his Machoke evolved into Machamp, and Gold also got a Graveler. That will get evolved into a Golem as well, so officially you've seen all 4 trait evolutions from Generation 1. And you've also seen the 2 trait evolutions involving the King's Rock item. Unfortunately, there is another trait evolution item. In fact, I think there's 2 of them that we still haven't seen at this point. I looked up where you find them, and I was less than impressed, let's say. At any rate, we'll cross those bridges when we get to them. We've still got plenty of game left to go. In the meantime, I should also mention that I decided to try out breeding, which I don't really think I've done in any Pokemon game in any serious capacity, so more details on the breeding that I did when that becomes relevant. In the meantime, there's your trait evolutions. We can move on to actual gameplay now. So, there are a couple of items that I'm going to pick up first and foremost, starting with an item that you can get by going back to Cherry Grove City all the way at the beginning of the game, and if you surf across this water, you will find someone fishing on this tiny little island, I guess it is. You can actually see this guy way earlier in the game, but until you have surfed, you cannot get his Mystic Water, which is an item that powers up Water-type moves. Better late than never to get it, I guess. Silver could have used that a lot earlier, I think. Anyways, something I haven't touched upon is that this game has 7 NPCs. Each one appears only during a specific day of the week. In this case, I have found Frieda of Friday, and she gave me the Poison Barb, an item that powers up poison attacks. I bet that sounds totally useful, but maybe it'll come in handy. The annoying thing is, these guys only appear during a specific day of the week, so it's actually very difficult to find them on your own. Luckily, the game does eventually tell you where they can all be found, and when, so that's okay. And as you just saw, Crystal got the Raikou encounter, which means Raikou and Entei can both be tracked by Chris with the Pokédex, so that'll come in handy. But where could Beast number 3 be? Well, it turns out that you can encounter Suicune, or Suicune, I don't know anymore. You can encounter him on Route 42 by cutting through this tree in the middle of the route. I missed him last time because I went through Mount Mortar, but there he is. And you can also pick up a green Apricorn here. There are 3 colors of Apricorn here, but the green one is the most useful. Well, I guess it's time to get on with the plot. We get to return to Goldenrod City and take back the radio tower from Team Rocket. And this is not a part of the game that I very much enjoy. Like with the Rocket hideout, Team Rocket's levels are really low for the part of the game that I'm at. Of course, it is possible to play this part of the game immediately after beating Morty back in Ecruteak City, so again, they needed to design the area with the expectation that someone would do this part of the game immediately as soon as it was available. Honestly though, we could have avoided that if Team Rocket only took over the radio tower after acquiring 7 badges, then that wouldn't be an issue. So to be honest, this just isn't going to be a very challenging area of the game for me, and probably for most players. And you know what else? Even not counting the difficulty problem, I really don't like the radio tower as a dungeon in general. I guess you could count it as a dungeon, but the thing about dungeons is that in Generation 1 you had the Rocket Hideout and Silphco. Both of those areas had puzzles, and you could actually get through them fairly quickly if you knew what you were doing. In fact, in Silphco, you really only had like 4 fights to go through, because if you knew where the card key was, then you could just go through the correct teleporters, get it, and then go straight to the top floor and fight Giovanni. The radio tower, on the other hand, has about a dozen trainers that you cannot avoid. You have to go into their line of sight in order to move to the next floor. and they really don't have any Pokemon of interest. All of the rockets have poison types, and there are a couple scientists with Magnemites, so yeah, just bring a ground type and a psychic type, and you're pretty much good to go. And another thing is, at least Silphco had a bunch of items and other things you could find if you explored the building. Here, there's not really any of that at all. So yes, you're very much getting the abridged treatment here. I'm going to skip over most of the fights because there's just not anything interesting to say. Just being perfectly honest here, this is not my favorite part of the game. I mean, look at this. How does this guy see me from all the way down there? Normally, trainers don't see you from that far down the screen, so that's a little bit interesting. Anyways, as I open my party here, you're going to notice that I have a Snubble with the EXP share equipped. That Snubble is something I decided to breed for, and the reason I did that is because we have a Dragon Gym coming up after this, so we're going to need a Fairy type for that. Those do exist in this generation, right? Of course they do. And now for the most annoying fight ever. You thought this guy was the director of the radio tower, but it was I, Dio Brando! Is that how the meme goes? I don't watch JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Anyways, this imposter is actually the most annoying fight in the entire tower. He has, and I am not kidding you here, 6 Pokemon. They're all coughing. Except for one wheezing, but they're all coughing. I think the only way this could get any more boring if it were like 6 Sentret or something. Anyways, these coughing do have a sort of gimmick to them. They all know self-destruct, so if you are not careful and don't have a ghost type, they could blow up your entire team. Then again, they do blow themselves up if that happens. So as long as you get rid of them before they explode, you'll be fine. Silver wasn't really prepared for that, so he kind of took a lot of damage in the process. I suppose a gimmick battle is better than nothing. It actually does kind of remind me of this one Rocket Grunt from Stadium 2 who also uses a bunch of exploding Pokemon. And he's then immediately followed up by a Staller. I think the game is trying to tell me something with that, but I'm not sure. Oh yeah, and before I forget to mention it, Chris also has a Gengar now. I figured that a Gengar would be my best bet for capturing the Beast Trio, so Chris is going to go ahead and use one against them when the time comes. I'm probably going to be capturing them on Crystal version too. So what a nice guy this imposter is. He tells us where the real director is and hands over the key we need to get into the location he's being held at. If he had not given us this key, if he had like chucked it in an incinerator or something, actually that'd be real inconvenient for Team Rocket, but if some random grunt was holding the key, then we'd never be able to get it. We would have to like search every Rocket grunt to find it, and Team Rocket would probably accomplish their goal. Anyways, as soon as you step into the basement, right behind you is your rival who's actually ready for a fight this time. Took a while for that to happen. Does anyone else feel like there are fewer rival fights in Gen 2 than there are in Gen 1? I suppose they were far more frequent in Gen 1. There wasn't a lot of space between them, but in Gen 2, there's definitely a lot more going on in between rival battles. Anyways, the rival has not really changed that much. He's still got more or less the same team. I mean, for sure, his Zubat has now evolved into Golbat, but he's still got his Haunter, he's still got his Magnemite, and he's still got his starter. However, in 2 of the 3 possible versions of this fight, the starter has actually reached its final form. Here's one of them, Feraligatr, and yes, that is how it's spelled. There wasn't enough space for them to add the O between the T and the R, so it's like Feraligatr. Oh, and something that came as a surprise to me is that the Water Starter actually gets its final form the fastest in Generation 2, at level 30. So, yeah, Water wins yet again, although in this case, the rival's Water Starter just still has Water Gun. Like, there are a bunch of other moves you could get. Don't you have the HM for Surf? Come on, man. At this point, I think you could sum up the rival as somebody that you beat by just using the correct types against each of his Pokemon. Really not a whole lot to say here. I don't know if this is intentional, but they might have a sort of dynamic going on with the rivals and the gym leaders, whereas the gym leaders feel like a sort of wall that you have to come up with a plan to get around, the rival feels like something that's just a check to make sure you're using a variety of Pokemon and they're sufficiently leveled, which is an interesting way to do things, if that's the intention. Oh yeah, he has a new Pokemon, Sneasel, the Dark and Ice type. It's double weak to fighting, and that's all I can really say about it. And here we can see that the Fire Starter does not get its final evolution in this fight, because Quilava evolves at level 36. It's the slowest out of the 3 to get its final form, really weird. And in Crystal version, you can see that Marowak is proving to be a very good Pokemon here. Just sweep the entire enemy team with Bonemerang. I kind of feel bad about using Marowak, as a matter of fact, because if you'll remember, I got it from the Game Corner, where you would have to grind up a bunch of coins in order to be able to purchase it. I think it's fine though, because the card flipping minigame is actually favorable to the player in terms of odds. I actually looked this up. Anyways, with a rival defeated yet again, it's time for some evolutions, because I actually got like 3 of them after this fight across all 3 playthroughs. First up, you have Croconaw, who evolves to Feraligatr at level 30, like I mentioned. And that's actually not the only evolution Silver got. Silver also had the EXP share on the Voltorb, so now, at level 30, Voltorb evolves into Electrode. Unfortunately, Electrode still lacks any sort of electric attack at the moment. I don't really know why it's taking so long for him to learn one, and there aren't really any electric TMs at this point, but he's got Rollout. Meanwhile, in Gold version, Snubbull has begun evolving into Granbull, so I should probably explain what's so special about this Pokemon that I hatched. Well, through breeding, you can actually get certain moves onto Pokemon that could not normally learn them, and there's no way to really learn this through normal gameplay except by experimentation. I mean, this is probably one of the things that was made to sell player's guides or that library in Stadium 2, but I did breed a specific move onto this Snubbull that I'm going to need later, so if you can guess what move that is, you're welcome to, but you'll find out at the end of the video anyways. Well, with a rival finally dealt with, we can move on to the actual puzzle of the underground warehouse. There are 3 switches here, and depending on the order you hit them in, different combinations of shutters will be open or closed. In order to move on with the game, simply hit the switches in the order of 3, 2, and 1. That will get you through to the next area of the game. There is, however, an item that you have to find a different combination of switches to get to, but I don't know what that item is. I'm not sure if it's worth it, so I'll come back for it later maybe. Then all the trainers will be gone at least. Sadly, that's the only real puzzle in this entire dungeon, I guess you could call it. Now, I'd have been pretty stoked if they decided to turn the entirety of Goldenrod City into a dungeon unto itself, but no, we just have a couple more trainers to get through and a couple more items to find. At least they're good items. Saves me a little bit of money. I guess the EXP is worth it at least, because it's high time Chris got the final evolution for her starter, which she's going to get after this fight right here. Yet another generic rocket grunt goes down, and Bailey finally evolves into Meganium. Really cool looking Pokemon, but again, it's a grass starter. Like, this game really just hates the grass type for some reason. All of Team Rocket consists of poison and some flying types, and none of the gyms are favorable to the grass type at all. And also, Gold went ahead and got the evolution for Hoothoot. Hoothoot finally became a Noctowl after all this time, so that's that at least. Noctowl also looks pretty cool, but there's not really a whole lot of use for it at this point. It's an early bird. It's not going to be useful this late in the game. There's also a Max Ether in this corner, and there's also a trainer here who actually remembers you from the Rocket Hideout and still talks like he does back in the Rocket Hideout, so that's kind of neat. I'm surprised Team Rocket doesn't fire him after the first failure, though. He kind of just blurted out the password at us. Anyways, he goes down, same as all the other ones. He's got a Grimer. Interesting. And there's only one more Rocket Grunt guarding the Director, so just a little bit more, you guys, and we'll finally be out of this. I really was getting exhausted after playing this the first time, but I had to do it 3 times for all 3 playthroughs, so that wasn't exactly... that's not something that you should subject yourself to multiple times. And hey, there's a TM here. TM35 is... I think it's Sleep Talk? I don't remember exactly. Sleep Talk is a move that lets you use moves while you are asleep, but it picks a move at random, so there's always a chance that if, say, you were going for a Rest Sleep Talk strategy, Sleep Talk could select Rest, and that would be kind of redundant and embarrassing. So the Director gives us the card key that opens the shutter door on the 3rd floor of the radio tower, which means we have to trek all the way back there. Luckily, the developers were kind enough to give the player a shortcut back to the surface. It leads to the basement of the Goldenrod department store, and you can also pick up the Amulet Coin, which is a hold item that will double the prize money from all trainer battles, as long as you send out the Pokemon holding it in the battle at least once. Trust me, this item is a real boon. You definitely want to have this on you for the rest of the game, because money can actually be pretty tight in gold, silver, and crystal, especially if you've been sending it to your mother. So you can use this to make a lot of money, as a matter of fact. The trainers are still really easy, so you might as well make some bank while you're at it, especially with this guy. This guy's apparently known as the Team Rocket Fortress. I don't really know why. He's got a single Pokemon. It is level 36, which is higher than the rest of the guys here. But it's a Golbat. A Golbat! How is this a fortress? Are you just gonna, like, confuse me and make me flinch a lot? I bet that's the strategy. Confuse Ray to make me confused, and then Bite to make me flinch a lot. That's why he's called the Team Rocket Fortress. He never lets anybody get an actual attack in. Actually, while I'm at it, I should mention that there is a way to avoid getting flinched. Use Quick Attack, because Quick Attack always goes first, and you can only inflict flinch if you go first. So if you use Quick Attack, your opponent can't do that. Anyways, who do we have here? Apparently the same female Rocket executive from the Team Rocket hideout. Again, these guys have names in the remakes, I think, but I sure can't remember. She's got the same basic team as she had before, only the levels are a little higher. We're inching closer to the point where the levels start lining up with where they should be. Assuming, of course, that you are playing this immediately after the Ecruteak Gym. Again, just a little more and then this distraction will finally be over. So, moving on. Oh, she evolved her Gloom into a Vileplume. How did she get a Leaf Stone? There's none in the entire region. Well, maybe she's been mystery gifting. As I have. I've actually been mystery gifting, like, every day on Stadium 2. Well, pretty much every day, at least. Oh yes, and that was the final level Quilava needed to evolve into Typhlosion. Cool looking Pokemon, but here's a bit of trivia for you. Typhlosion's actually got the same base stats as Charizard. I don't know if that's supposed to mean anything, but there you go. Typhlosion's got a different moveset for sure, so we'll be seeing more of that in the future. Just one more of these guys to deal with now. And, you know, actually, I haven't mentioned it yet, but the director said that they might have a radio signal that could control all Pokemon. That kind of came out of nowhere, so I didn't really pay attention to it at the time. I know they've got a radio signal that causes Magikarp to evolve into Gyarados by force, and they could use that to cause a lot of chaos, so of course we have to take the radio tower to prevent that from happening, but it has no gameplay effect. It doesn't really cause Pokemon to start rampaging through the city, which would actually be pretty cool. But I'd imagine that would be really hard to pull off, especially on the Game Boy Color. Oh well. They also never address if the message they were broadcasting ever got through to Giovanni, at least not in this game. In the remakes, there's a special event that you can trigger that does let you fight Giovanni again, but I can't actually remember if the international audiences were allowed to unlock that event legitimately. So, that's interesting. Nothing to report about the battle, other than that executive has the Houndour line. That's a line of Pokemon that are exclusive to the post-game, even though they are introduced in this very generation, so kind of unfortunate that you have to wait so long to get them, and they're not the only Johto Pokemon that are like that. This game doesn't really do a good job representing the Johto Pokemon in the game about Johto, but there you go. So, we've saved the tower, apparently Team Rocket disbands yet again, this time for good, and we receive an interesting key item from the director as a reward. It's a different item in each of the 3 versions, and they each unlock a legendary for you to capture. So once I've gotten the final Johto badge, I think I will take those on. By the way, none of the legendaries in the Johto games are exclusive to one version or another. You can actually get all 3 of them in all versions of the game. It's just that you have to wait a little longer for the ones that you don't unlock here and now. So that's very kind of them. Also, there's a free Ultra Ball here in Crystal version only. I don't really know why Crystal version decided to add a free Ultra Ball here, but that's fine. Anyways, before you leave the tower, you also want to talk to this lady, as she will give you a pink bow as a reward. A tiny little bow tie as a reward for saving your life, how nice. Well, it does power up the normal type moves of whoever has it equipped, so that's nice. Actually, if you trade Pokemon from Generation 1, you can get an item called the Polka Dot Bow, which does the same thing. I have one, as a matter of fact. But it's nice to have one of those now, I suppose. Upon returning to Mahogany Town, we see that a new shop has opened up in order to replace the building that concealed the Rocket hideout. You can still go into the hideout if you want to pick up items there, but this shop has some actually good items for this point in the game, so don't mind if I do. I've got a lot of money for buying stuff now. So finally, setting off from Mahogany Town eastward, we find a tree that grows burnt berries. How does the tree grow berries that are already burnt? I don't get it. So on this route, you have to actually surf to find the patch of grass with a wild Pokemon in it, and there's a max revive there as well. No new Johto Pokemon in that patch of grass, but there are a couple things I will capture for now. And as we finish up this route, we find a cave that leads to an actual dungeon for a change, with like puzzles and stuff. Isn't that amazing? This is the Ice Path. It looks kind of dull in Gold and Silver versions, but it does introduce ice sliding, which we saw briefly in the Mahogany Gym, so I hope you're used to that kind of puzzle because there's quite a number of ice sliding puzzles, and I know those might be difficult to work with. I will of course be showing all of the solutions in this video, so don't worry. Now, the cave looks kind of dull in Gold and Silver versions, so in Crystal version, they gave the Ice Path a graphical overhaul. It's really cool looking, because Ice Path, cool. I really need to chill with the puns. Anyways, this is Delibird. I got an encounter with it first thing as soon as I got in the cave. Very lucky. Delibird is a kind of, Santa Claus delivery bird. I don't really know why they decided to turn Santa Claus into a bird. It only knows one move, and that move has a random chance of either dealing a lot of damage, a little damage, or healing the opponent. So, very much a joke Pokemon. You have to give it TMs for it to have any good moves because Present is the only move it learns, but I'm sure there will be a use for Delibird somewhere down the line, somehow. I'm capturing it for Dex completion anyways. I really don't know if Delibird has ever been competitively viable for any reason. I can't really imagine it has. Anyways, this first room changed slightly in Crystal version, but I think the solution to the sliding puzzle is more or less the same idea. You just gotta kind of map out the entire room in your head and then imagine where you can slide to. And you have to complete this sliding puzzle too, because that's actually HM07 right there in that little nook. If you do not complete that puzzle, you've missed HM07 and you're gonna wonder where it was when you inevitably run into the game's final obstacle. Also, I'm capturing Swinub, which is the pre-evolved form of Price's ace Pokemon, Piloswine. I don't really remember it being good in any way, but capturing it can actually be very easy because it knows a move that causes it to stay alive at 1 health if it's hit with a lethal move. So getting it down to 1 HP is actually very easy if it decides to use that move. And hey, we also have strength puzzles in addition to the ice sliding puzzles. You need to push all of these strength boulders into the holes. You did remember to bring a strength user with you, didn't you? I actually forgot myself and had to waste another Pokemon's move slot on strength, but no matter. At least the puzzle is somewhat interesting. The idea is to push the boulders into the holes, which means you have to make sure that you always have a spot that you can continue pushing the boulder from, and not push it into a corner like I just did. Luckily, if you leave the room and come back, all of the boulders that did not fall into the holes will have their positions reset. If they fall into the holes, they've gone down the hole permanently, but that's fine because you want them all to go down the hole. Because once you get down to the bottom floor, you will find that there is an ice field beneath this floor, and when you push the boulders, they all serve as obstacles that you can use to slide around the room easier. So that's a pretty interesting way to do the puzzle. And I'll just push the boulder into the hole, and you can fall down after the boulder if you so choose. So the Ice Path is sort of the successor to the Seafoam Islands, only this time it's not optional. Anyways, there are some items you can pick up around the room. There's a max potion here, and if you slide all the way down here... By the way, when you slide, it actually uses up your repel steps, but you can't get encounters on the ice field anyways. So maybe hold off on the repels while you're in here. There was a hidden Carbos in that corner, and for some reason they put a Rock Smash boulder here, but there's no point because you can just walk around and pick up the item anyways. I don't really get what the point of that was. This is the Never Melt Ice. It is the type boosting item for the Ice type. And speaking of Ice type, I'm going to capture a Sneasel of my own. It's actually noteworthy that Crystal adds Sneasel to this area's encounter table. It wasn't here in Gold and Silver, and that was kind of annoying because you had to wait until way late in the post-game to get it. Not that you would want Sneasel at this point in the game. It's got a high attack stat, but Dark and Ice are unfortunately not physical types. So that's kind of an issue. I really think the dark type should have been physical. That would have helped a lot of dark Pokemon be better. I mean, ghosts have high special defense, psychic types have high special defense. Making dark into a special move doesn't really help them against those types. Anyways, moving on with the rest of the cave, there's not a lot more to say. There are a couple more ice sliding puzzles, and as you can see, the repel wore off in the middle of my sliding. So like, did I stop sliding, notice that the repel wore off, and then, I don't know. If you solve that ice sliding puzzle, you get an iron. Nice to have some stat boosting items, they're also worth some money, but I actually will use them to boost some of my Pokemon stats, because they're gonna need it in the upcoming gym. So I think we're almost out of here. There's just a couple more items. Now there's a protein there, but I think I'm just gonna leave it be. I can always come back. Or actually, I can give an item to my Pokemon and that'll free up a slot. Yeah, the inventory limit is still kind of annoying if you don't take the time to store all of the items that you don't plan on immediately using. Hold items unfortunately still count as regular items, so they do count towards the inventory limit. So that can be a bit of an annoyance. But hey, we finally reached Blackthorn City, the location of the final gym in the Johto region. So naturally, we should capture some Pokemon first. On the route to the south, you can pick up Skarmory in Silver version, and I think Crystal version as well. Skarmory is a Steel flying type, and a pretty good one from what I hear. I really need to check out its status in Generation 2, but in the later generations it definitely became useful. So we'll see if I decide to use it in the current generation. I'd really like to, but I have a feeling it won't have any Steel or Flying moves. Just a hunch. And in Gold version, you can find Gligar, which is yet another poison flying type. I really don't know why they needed another one of these. It is poison flying, right? I have no idea. I've never used Gligar in my entire Pokemon career. Maybe that means it's time to do just that. But I've never really heard of Gligar being all that useful, so who knows. And with that, it's time for the final gym of the Johto region. It is the Dragon Gym. Which means this might get a little bit repetitive because the Dragon Gym has the same problem as the Ghost Gym, meaning there's only 2 lines of dragons in Generation 2. There's the Dratini line like you're already familiar with, and then there is the Horsey line which gained a new evolution, so at least this gym has a Johto Pokemon, even though it is an evolution of a previous evolution line. And it's also a trade hold item evolution, so don't expect me to get one anytime soon. This gym also has a strength puzzle in it, and apparently on the bottom floor there's a pool of lava. Why? What is this, Bowser's Castle or something? Anyway, similar to the ice path, you just gotta push the boulders down the holes and that will make a path to the gym leader. And there are also some trainers in your way, of course. You'll probably have to fight all of them, but no biggie. That'll at least get you ready for the leader, in case you needed some last minute experience points. The only thing standing between us and the Elite Four is Clair, the gym leader, and apparently the world's best Dragon Master. Well, I'll say this much, dragons are more of a threat than they were in Generation 1 because they have actual dragon moves this time around. We may have just gotten through a cave full of ice types that you could capture, but Clair's got those bases covered. There aren't that many dragons in Gen 2, so unfortunately Clair has 3 of the same Pokemon, Dragonair to be specific, and I should mention that Dragonair is not double weak to ice like Dragonite is. It's rather interesting that when Dragonair evolves, it becomes double weak to one of its weaknesses. Each Dragonair has Thunder Wave, Dragon Breath, a Dragon-type move that inflicts paralysis, and a third move that I can't remember at this time. The fourth move is different for each Dragonair. The first has Surf, the second has Thunderbolt, and the third has Ice Beam. So you're not going to sweep them with most of the ice types you can find up to this point. They're probably weak to one of the elemental attacks. They have so many paralysis attacks too that I didn't bother curing it, I just ice punched through it. Battles with Clair can turn into a bit of a war of attrition, especially concerning her final Pokemon, Kingdra, the Water Dragon Pokemon. Now, due to that type combination, it's almost impossible to hit it for real super effective damage, because one of the types tends to resist what the other one is weak to. Thing is, it knows Hyper Beam, so if you can resist the Hyper Beams, then you should be able to use the free turns to outlast Kingdra eventually, which was the general strategy for Silver. He certainly had enough Hyper Potions to make it work. Now as for Chris had to also engage in a sort of war of attrition. Meganium doesn't really take super effective damage from most of the moves that Clair has, except for Ice Beam. So Meganium also has Body Slam, which does neutral damage to dragons, and does a decent amount of it at that, so that's pretty cool. And you can also use Reflect if you want to take half damage from Dragon Breath. For Chris, this fight was actually pretty exciting. I had to use all of her Pokemon in order to come out on top here. So, in order to resist the Surf and Ice Beam attacks, I sent in Azumarill and started using Rollout, thinking that strategy would work here, but then disaster struck when I got paralyzed. So I thought, for sure, I was going to lose a turn to paralysis. But watch what happens. I roll out once, and then immediately Azumarill rollouts again because the Quick Claw activated and that took out the second Dragonair. That is awesome. That is the kind of thing that really makes this series for me. Exciting moments like that, where your Pokemon just... It's like the Pokemon decided that it was going to win no matter what. That's really amazing when it happens. Of course, Azumarill got hit by Thunderbolt right afterwards because I think Crystal version switches up the order of the Dragonair, oddly enough. And this wouldn't be a Chris battle without something really, really strange happening. So, how about Marowak with Icy Wind? Yeah, that's not something you expected, huh? This makes me immune to Thunder Wave, and I can hit it with ice attacks. Very nice. That only leaves Kingdra, and it's here that I decide to bring in the Red Gyarados. Now, I was going to use a move called Twister. Gyarados learns this at level 35, it's a Dragon-type move, and therefore will inflict super effective damage, but it's so weak that you're better off just using Dragon Rage. It may be a fixed 40 damage, but that's still enough to take down Kingdra in 3 hits, and Kingdra is going to spam Hyper Beam, so this is actually going to work nicely. Now let's see how Gold is going to handle this battle. Say, didn't he raise a Granbull for this fight? Okay, I probably owe you guys a big explanation because this is really crazy. So, the move Present is bugged in Gold and Silver versions. This is fixed in Crystal. What's happening here is the damage formula becomes glitched in such a way that the game takes your type as the enemy's defense and the enemy's type as your attack. I'm referring to the index numbers, i.e. the order the types appear in the game's internal list of types. So at the top of the list is Normal, which is 0, and at the bottom of the list is Dragon, which is 26. So the game is assuming an attack value of 26 because the enemy is a dragon, and a defense value of 0 because a normal type is using it. And also, Present is a normal type move even though it's exclusive to an ice type, so breeding it onto a normal type, which is what I did, that gives it the same type attack boost that you get from using a move whose type matches your own. I used X speeds exclusively so I could outspeed all of Clair's Pokemon, and I've also got a Polka Dot Bow equipped. So this results in a bunch of one-hit kills no matter what. And they can't do anything about it. It's great! You know, some might consider Clair to be a sore loser based on her dialogue, but if that just happened to me, I'd be pretty upset too. The only real hitch in this plan is that Present can sometimes heal your opponent instead of hurting them, but Granbull is a pretty sturdy Pokemon. I think he can take a hit, and even then I've got Hyper Potions. So yeah, I guess I can accept an additional task from a sore loser because I did sort of abuse a glitch in order to win here. So she requests that you pick up a Dragon Fang from the Dragon Shrine. Of course, you can transfer a Dragon Fang in from another save file. However, she will know what you're trying to do and won't accept that unless you actually go to the Dragon Shrine. So off we go. Crystal needs to make a bit of a pit stop, however. As I told you, she had to teach Azumarill Strength because she forgot her Strength Pokemon at home. So we're going to visit the Move Deleter. The Move Deleter is a function that they introduced so that you had an option to delete your HM moves, because you can't delete HM moves simply by overriding it with another move. That would make it possible to become stuck, such as if you got stuck behind a Strength boulder or on an island in the middle of water or something. So they introduced the Move Deleter to allow you to get rid of moves you no longer need, which is good because Azumarill actually needs to learn another HM move anyways, because there's a whirlpool that we have to get past in the Dragon Shrine, and I really think this was unnecessary, But whatever, I guess Whirlpool can be useful later. It's a trapping move, you see. I do think this game has a bit of an overabundance of HMs, and that kind of carries over to other generations as well. Anyways, here's the Dragon Shrine. It's right down these stairs and through this cave, and oh my goodness, an ambush! The game has never done that before. A trainer is just right there ready to spot you when you enter the area. That's kind of mean, actually. I never thought I'd get ambush spawned in Pokemon of all things, but here we are, I suppose. Anyways, we need to surf on the water and go all the way around the back of the shrine in order to get to the place we're supposed to be in, and unfortunately that's going to involve clearing a whirlpool. This game really just has too many HMs if you ask me. I know they need to make obstacles to stop you from getting into dungeons too early, but come on. You have to waste yet another move slot every time another one of those gets introduced. So in Crystal version, it's actually not just about going into a shrine and getting the Dragon Fang you need. You have to take a little bit of a test as well. And it looks like this guy doesn't really agree with what Clair is making us do, but we just have to answer a couple of questions. What are Pokemon to me? Invincible killing machines, for one thing. What helps me win battles? Strategy, cheating, same thing. I want to battle, well, honestly anybody, I need the experience. What is most important for raising Pokemon? Violence! I would unironically answer violence, because you do need to beat people up in order to level up. Yeah, I care deeply about Pokemon, that's why I send them into dangerous situations all the time. Well, with that, we've passed the test, and Clair arrives shortly after to see the results. She is gonna be disappointed. Yeah, there's no point in asking, I passed. Yes, I passed. Also, that's like the only time you hear Clair's theme, I think. Wait, you haven't been approved either? Clair, it's 5 questions. You don't even have to answer honestly, just like, lie. And then the guy threatens to tell Oni-chan Lance about how Clair can't pass a simple test, but I can. So we finally get the final badge of the Johto region, and that will allow all Pokemon, regardless of level, to obey us. I mean, like, we don't even have Pokemon above level 50 at this point. It is kind of an odd thing, actually. The badges make Pokemon up to level 50, and then 70, and then 100 obey you without question, but, like, are you expected to have Pokemon that high level by this point? I don't think so. And as we exit, Clair reappears to give us the Dragon Breath TM, and you also get to hear her theme again. I think this is a new theme that was added in Crystal version. It's really weird for her, of all people, to get a theme. Anyway, in Gold and Silver versions, you just have to surf all the way to the back of the cave where you will find the Dragon Fang. It's in the same location as in Crystal version, and it powers up dragon moves if you let a Pokemon hold it. Not that I have any good dragon moves that would be powered up. Dragon Rage is still a fixed damage move after all. And she more or less says the same thing in both versions here. She says that we now need to go to New Bark Town and then surf east to find the Pokemon League. But I have other ideas, for the moment. Such as capturing a Dratini of my very own. Now, this is one of the more annoying trades that is in the game. In Blackthorn City, there is an NPC who will trade you a Dragonair for another Pokemon, but it has to be a female Dragonair. So what you have to do is capture a Dratini with a Good Rod in Dragon's Den, and make sure it's female and then level it up all the way to 30. For some reason, all of the sites that I went to say that the Dratini will be caught at level 10, but mine was caught at level 20, so I don't really get that. Oh, and before we do the actual trade, if you come to this location on a Saturday, this guy will give you a spell tag. This is an item that increases the power of ghost-type moves. Not a lot of those in this game either. Anyways, here's the house where you trade a female Dragonair for, of all things, a Rhydon. I don't think you can find Rhyhorn in Johto at all, so Rhydon is pretty cool to have. Not that it has a particularly big move pool, but if you're lacking a defensive Pokemon, this is a trade you might want to think about taking on. Now in Crystal version, the trade was actually altered. Instead of a Rhydon, you now get a Dodrio. Yes, a completely run-of-the-mill bird. I don't care that it starts with Tri-Attack, and I don't care that it's carrying a unique item that lets you flee any encounter. A Dodrio? How is that better than a Rhydon? Seriously. It's a run-of-the-mill bird. You can find those anywhere in the Johto region. I've got Noctowl, I've got Fearow. Yeah. Well, at any rate, here's Silver's new Rhydon. No idea if he's going to use it. He's still got that Onyx from earlier, so I guess we'll have to figure out some way to make Rhydon useful. At any rate, that's going to do it for this episode of Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal. We've got all the badges, and we could go to the Pokemon League next, but there are a bunch of items to collect left in the Johto region, and of course, there are still lots of Pokemon left to find, so I think it's time we take on some of that before we head to the Pokemon League. Stay tuned for that. Later, everybody!